Welcome to the RaceGuru Thunder Hour, brought to you by FantasyGuru.com and the Elite Plus Network. As always, we are joined by the one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend behind the curtain, Sean Engel. You can find on X at SeanE247. Remember, that's Sean, S-E-A-N, the nice, easy way to spell it. And the DFS guru himself, that's what I call him anyway. Mark Hogan is back with us again this week. We are blessed to have Mark throughout the year. How much? Hey, we'll take whatever we can get because Mark is a busy guy, and hopefully he's busy cashing checks from the DFS lineups. Maybe not from NASCAR this weekend, but we've seen it out there, Mark. You can find Mark on Twitter at DFS_Marlin. You can always find everybody, myself included, in our Discord chat. Gentlemen, welcome to the RaceGuru Thunder Hour.
We are thundering along now that we got ourselves our first race of the year in the books with the Daytona 500 all set and done. We got ourselves a season ahead of us. We got Atlanta this week, but you know what? It's all par for the course with the Thunder Hour, so it's all fun.
Started with a nice bang. That was great. Wonderful weekend of excitement and crashes and wrecks. It feels like normal again.
Feels like normal. It does, especially for Daytona, although we'll get into a little bit. They actually wrecked more than they had in like 8 years. So anyway, we do want to give a shout out to FantasyGuru.com, who has blessed us and allowed us to be here. Please check out the MVP package. That's where you can find, with that package, that's where you can find all of our racing content, get you access to everything on the site for DFS and betting purposes, for anything and everything that is not baseball and football. So please check that out. It is discounted at 40% off, 60% off. It's a huge discount. You can get it 12 months, $79.99. That's the whole year. Like I said, that covers hockey, basketball, not baseball. I'm forgetting one. MMA, the esports, racing, golf. Like I said, everything but football and baseball. But if you're into baseball, spring training, I don't know if you know this, Mark. Spring training's around the corner. I don't know if you're a big baseball guy. But the the baseball draft guide is now available. It, of course, is headlined by the one and only Ray Flowers, the Oracle, if you will, which I'm still upset Twitter never let him have that name. I still bothers me. That and Jerry Jordan not being able to get verified on Twitter. I'll never figure that out. But anyway, please check out FantasyGuru.com. Check out the baseball draft guide. If you're not sure what kind of package works best for you, please reach out to support at FantasyGuru.com. I promise you they will hook you up with whatever makes the most sense for you. Well, gentlemen, do we want to talk about Daytona 500? Do we want to talk about the trucks or Xfinity race? Where do you want to start?
Well, first things first, before we get right into that, we should mention this too, but we were nominated for an FSWA award. That's exciting times, right?
I can't lie, Sean. I was flipping through Twitter on whatever morning that was, and things were getting retweeted, and I'm seeing stuff, and I'm just scrolling and scrolling. All of a sudden, I see Race Guru, and I went, "What?" So I checked, and I'm like, "Holy snap! We were nominated for an FSWA award." So cool. I'm very honored. I know we all are. I did not see it coming, and quite frankly, I don't know what our shots are to win, Sean and Mark, but I think it's cool to be nominated.
Yeah, I think it's really incredible, especially in our first year of doing this podcast all together, that we even got nominated for an FSWA award. It's a real honor, and it's real awesome to be included with a lot of other awesome podcasts that are out there too. It was in the best podcast category for multiple sports. Yeah, it's quite something to be nominated with a lot of talent. There's a lot of great podcasts out there. FSWA has gathered a lot of great ones. So, it's awesome just to be featured.
I agree.
Yeah, I would say, just us doing this has also sharpened my process. It's also helped me a lot in building lineups. From my perspective, I can build lineups from a DFS angle, and getting your guys' feedback on the NASCAR side of things and just your knowledge within the sport has taken my game to another level. So I think just overall the collaboration, for as much as it's helped us, it's nice to see and have it come to fruition that we're seeing it help for others as well. So hopefully we can continue that. continue to expand upon what some of the discussions we've had, and maybe uncover some new tips and tricks going into this season too. So let's see what we got.
We can't rest on our laurels, right? We can't. And I have already I played around with some lineups this week and made some mental notes. We all talked about chasing the place differential, but we also, thanks to Mark, really talked a little bit about what we can do to be contrarian. If we're going to shoot for the top, you've got to be a little contrarian, and what are smart ways to do that, right? And we had a decent discussion in Discord about that. When Chase Briscoe's name came up, Austin Stendrick, and a couple of the others. So, I know I've said this to you on here and privately, Mark. I think you bring a very massive dynamic to this podcast that I do think has made everybody better. And honestly, look, it's going to sound cheesy. Our goal is you guys to win money. I don't know how many people listen or tune in, but our goal is genuinely to help you win money. I mean, we take a lot of pride in some of the long shot calls we get right, but we take a lot of pride in helping you build good lineups. So to tee off where Mark took us there, that's the goal. That's where we want to be. And to be nominated and even recognize that we exist, quite frankly, I mean, I was shocked they even knew we existed, to be honest with you. So, that's why it kind of made my day. But anyway, should we talk Daytona? I mean, Wreckfest or High Speed Demo Derby? I mean, what do you want to go with here? I mean, 41 out of the 45 cars that entered Daytona, which we only raced 41 in the race, but 41 out of 45 from the whole weekend caught damage. Only 4 cars left without damage, and 2 of them never even made it to the big. It's a high-speed demo. I do want to throw out an idea, though. Why don't we do 3-wide start like they do at Indy?
I'm for it. I'm for the idea of trying that out as it is, too. Be very interesting to see, especially because Daytona and Talladega in particular would be very good at handling that.
I don't know if we could do it at Atlanta, and I get that's an Indy thing, but they do the 5-wide with the Outlaws as a hat tip type of thing, right? We've seen them do 3-wide at other places that way. But I saw a photo of a 3-wide pack coming by, and I went, why don't we just start 3-wide? Why do we play this game of inching up and diving a moment? Just start them 3-wide. Let's get the big one out of the way and see what happens.
Just throw it out there and see if it sticks. That's very in line with NASCAR and what their strategy is for trying to come up with entertainment too. Just throw something at it, see if it sticks.
I've jumped the shark. I'm on the full F it. Let's gimmick the hell out of it. And I feel like this is actually a decent gimmick, if you will, because I think it would catch on. And maybe you have to do it as a hat tip to Indy. The reason I'm asking for it is the Indy 500 no longer really does the 3-wide start. I mean, I'm so old. I remember watching them come at me literally 3-wide, and we just don't. And I get it. The safer barriers, the narrower track, there's reasons for that. They still do what they can with it, but we could get away with that at Daytona and Talladega. Like, that is very reasonably possible, in my opinion. I say we try it.
Why not? What do you think, Mark? You for that idea?
I mean, why not? Until, I could see, cars in 5th through 25th all wrecking out on the second lap. So, and then I don't know how the rating, might make for great TV for the first 5 minutes, but what happens to the sponsors for the next 3 hours? So that might. But
maybe we get good racing then. Maybe we get 2 hours of good racing then, right?
You get 5 guys going at it.
I would argue the duels put on a pretty good show, right?
Yeah, it was good.
Shorter laps, but also a smaller field, right? So there's a little more breathing room. So that's why I'm like, screw it. Get the big one often and early. We'll get it out of the way. Maybe we're doing it at a lower speed so we don't kill anybody. And maybe we get a good race the rest of the way. Either that, or I still say if we're going to keep the stages, we run the first stage the right way, the second stage the opposite direction, and the third stage we have jumps with fire on the backstretch. We can have 3 separate races.
You're sounding like Tony Stewart in that old interview.
And after your second pit stop, it's required to throw a monkey in the back for the rest of the race.
Oh, did you enjoy that article, Mark?
Oh yeah, it was great, man.
Flacco Jocko, baby. I still love that story, man. It's one of my favorites. There are so many good ones, but that is one of my favorites. That and when the driver left North Wilkesboro, when the revenuers were there.
Speaking of the duels, though, I will say I played some DFS and I DFS'd one of my lineups for that one, and
Good deal.
it was fun. I wish we had the duels like every single week,
Right?
and a little bit
Yeah.
more consistency with it, because I'd definitely play some more DFS contests with that.
Well, in all fairness, duels are basically heats, right? Like we see
Yeah.
at the local and dirt tracks. So there's part of me that's like, why do we do the stages like we do? Why don't we do heat races? If we're going to throw the flag and stop the field, what is the point of really doing 500 miles? We are intentionally breaking up the race, right? And making
Yeah.
smaller races within the group. So why not do a couple of heat races? And that now sets the lineup for the big race. You know what I mean? And maybe that's the dirt tracker in me, but I'm with you, Mark. And when you go, like, you could go to, I need to come down and visit you. We need to go to Volusia. We need to go to New Smyrna, but you go to those places and we would experience that exact thing. And it's a lot of fun. People get up for the heat races. There's still a lot of, I don't want to say a lot on the line because it's hard to pass. So that's your way to, help your cause. Anyway, I mean, we're getting off track here on that, but Daytona was wild. Hat tip to William Byron for being in ninth as they took the white flag, and he found a way to avoid the Denny Hamlin mess. And I don't blame Hamlin. I do want to say this regarding the Logano Stenhouse deal. As much as I want to blame Joey, he had the fastest car. I tend to agree with Kyle Busch. It was premature, unnecessary. However, and I don't really blame Ricky much, he blocked. Go watch Joey block. He does the same blocks, okay?
Yeah.
This is a byproduct of this style of racing. With that many laps to go, we see it consistently. Don't hate the player, hate the game. This is the game. And I don't know what we can do to convince people otherwise. That's why we said when you build your DFS lineups, target everybody in the back. I kid you not. I don't know about you guys, but I bet you 3 to 4 of my drivers in every single lineup started 30th or worst.
Oh, yeah, that was like that for me, too. And I do want to also add this, too, about the Logano and Stenhouse incident as well, too. One of the drivers, I think, was commenting on this, or some sort of analyst was commenting on this, and I kind of agree with this take about what happened, that really, I think Ricky just put an aggressive block on there, and Joey just didn't like that and just determined in his own head that all right, the next time he tries to leave a hole, I'm just going to drive through it and not lift. And I think that's exactly what happened.
Well, and the hole wasn't there. I mean, I think I heard the same driver you're referencing, because the driver I heard said Joey basically tried to make a hole. The hole wasn't there, and he forced the issue. And Kyle Busch's point was, you got the fastest car. There's no need to do that. But like I said, this is typical Joey. He had the fastest car when he dumped Kenseth many, many years ago. And he didn't need to. He had plenty of time to get around him, but he doesn't care. Now, whether that goes back to the way he was driven back when, I'm at the point, I don't care, Joey. It's time to move on. You are consistently at the front of and creating these wrecks, man. And you do it with your blocking, and you do it with your pushing. And I'm a little over you crying when it happens to you. Frankly, I applaud Austin Dillon for wrecking you at Richmond. I applaud Matt Kenseth for wrecking you at Martinsville. You can call me blood hungry or whatever you want. I don't care. I think you're being a whiny little bitch, and I would gladly tell you that to your face.
And this is why 2 things that were referenced last week do come into fruition here. A, what I said about Joey Logano being a big risk for the Daytona race this past week.
He did get to the front early.
And 2, you're just referencing again why you picked Joey in order to do good, because you hated his guts.
Mark, we remember when we had that whole discussion, we said, hey, we like your approach, but just be advised, Joey's going to go to the front. You saw that right off the bat, right? I mean, this is his MO at these tracks. He is adamant the best place to be is at the front. And with Austin Cindric second, or starting on the front row like he did, how the first part of the race started was exactly what I think most people expected. The Force pushed well. They pushed him to the front, right? They could hook up, and he's going to do that. And Brad did too. Brad did get up to the front of the field after being in the back. You saw Martin Truex kind of work it. He was like, all right, I can do this. And he kind of went back. That's typically how Truex does it, right? So, and I did tell Jen to put a bet on Joey Logano. I did my part to jinx his ass. So, I am consistent on all that. And little teaser, we might see a little more consistency this week. Similar kind of racing. Just saying.
All right. Well, before we move on towards other things, I do want to give a quick shout out to the Xfinity and Truck Series races as well. Both of them had their share of pretty decent action, especially the Xfinity race there too.
Great stuff.
Yeah, Xfinity was pretty awesome to see, and even the end with Jesse Love winning, he had to fight to earn that one too, from blocking all those lanes.
Hey, those RCR Xfinity cars on those tracks, dude. I mean, Austin Hill, I had put in the bet Discord. I don't want to bet Hill because of the low odds. I would rather have Jesse Love. And then I didn't list Jesse Love as one of my favorites to win, which makes no sense because I had Hill there, but I think I was trying to limit to 4. But that's why we say at these tracks, chase the odds. They were same teams, same equipment. We've seen Jesse Love win at Talladega, so you know he's capable. That was a smart play. And, man, hat tip to RCR. Kyle Busch was bad fast at Daytona. Don't even get me going on why they didn't let him back out in the track. You guys let me go down that rabbit hole, and we're probably going to get banned. But they had fast cars with Busch and Dillon, and the Xfinity cars, they were head and shoulders above the rest. They really were. So hat tip to them. I'm going to give a little black flag to the Truck Series. Y'all need to stop wrecking.
They kept hitting it looked like there was one turn they kept having an issue going, or I forget which one. But every single time they were spinning out. I think it was every single time it was like each car was spinning out in that same exact spot where I think they repaved that portion of the track. So it was weird. It definitely got weird towards the end there.
Now, Mark, let me ask you, did you watch the Xfinity race too, right?
I watched all 3. They at this point blend together a little bit for me.
Sure.
And I was definitely, I think the trucks race, not so much, but Xfinity and Cup, man, like a lot of my drivers wrecked. A lot of my guys took a lot of damage, fell to the back at the end of the race. So it was a frustrating weekend on that front.
Which we're going to have. I will be completely frank. It's going to be boom or bust when we go to these tracks, because when we hit, Mark, we're going to hit multiple lineups and we're going to hit bigger paydays, right? I mean, I lost 50%. I'm not crying. It wasn't a great week, but in all intents and purposes, it's not the end of the world, right? What I was kind of curious about was your thoughts, specifically the different type of racing, or if you thought it was a different style or type of racing that we saw from the Cup guys on Sunday versus the Xfinity. And the reason for my question is the Xfinity cars are much more like the old Cup cars, where the Cup cars today are more like kit cars. So I was kind of curious of, I don't want to say novice, but a guy that is openly admit you're more of a casual NASCAR fan. What your thoughts were with the Xfinity versus the Cup race as far as enjoying the show itself, that type of thing.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, if I take a step back, I thought the Xfinity race was more entertaining. It felt like the Cup race was a little bit more of a bull in the china shop type of feel, where it's like we're almost going after the big hits. I think the biggest thing, honestly, though, what put a damper on it for me was the rain delay. And I think and I know that we're not talking about racing, but just the expectation that it probably was going to rain, and they had plenty of time to just push out the start time towards the evening. I feel like the whole president thing probably had some influence on making sure they started at that time. But
yes and no there. I agree with you on the president, but NASCAR has made it a point. They've heard from fans. Fans at the track would prefer to see them go out on the track, even if it's only for 10 laps, and get the whole hubbub with the start of the race, start your engines, all of that, and then go into a delay. For the TV purposes, you're right. It doesn't jive well, and they never used to do that. But fans at the track started complaining because let's say it rained the rest of the night and they never got to see cars again. They at least got to hear and feel them come by one time, 10 times, whatever it was at full speed. But I'm not going to deny that when you have someone like the president showing up, you kind of want to get the show on the road type of thing. And they did. And look, they will, Mark, we'll see this. They'll move it up an hour. That's the window they give. Used to only be 30 or 45 minutes. They've opened it up to an hour now. So we're going to see this, especially with some of these later start times. You know, NASCAR used to regularly start at 11, 12 o'clock where you had a little bit more of a buffer. Not everywhere had lights. So all these ones that start a little later, they got burned so much last year. I think you'll see them move it up. But I agree with you from a TV standpoint. I actually went, took a nap, played with the dogs because I was with you. I came back, was like, oh man, they're going to go racing. And that's when I saw the screen was black. So I thought something happened with Max because I was hearing the chatter, only to look at the other TV and see the cars are covered up.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
you're right. It kills momentum. I will say this, Mark. Sean may or may not agree with me. I think you're going to find this year, you're going to find the Xfinity a more enjoyable product to watch.
Seemed much more strategic. It also seemed like there was a lot more team collaboration than the Cup race as well.
I can see that. I can see
One
Yeah.
thing I'll say about Xfinity, I did do ownership projections for that, and I was not too far off. The ones that I was off on was really just the chalk. I had Harrison Burton and Ryan Truex at 35% and 45%. They were both coming in at around
60.
I think 55, 65 between those two. So it was even heavier than I expected. But a lot of the other guys that I projected ownership for that I included in my player pool, I was within 5% for every single one of the other guys. So
that's impressive.
I don't, this is 1 week sample size, one race. So I don't want to jump the gun and say this is law. But the only thing I did, in case anyone wants to try this themselves, is I went to sports books. I looked up the odds and compared that to their starting position. And if their starting position was further back in a race like this, so I applied racing, general racing knowledge, place differential. If they were further back, I multiplied how far of the group they were back by their odds. So, for example, who was the favorite to win the race? I think for Xfinity, Austin Hill.
Definitely
So-
Austin Hill.
Yeah, he was plus 300.
So I took plus 300 as the kind of baseline, right? And so if the next guy is plus 600, naturally, if I'm already projecting Austin Hill at maybe 10% or whatever, then the next guy that has worse odds should be maybe 8 or 7%. Now, what I also did was if you had further back place differential, I prioritized those guys and multiplied them by multiples of 10. So, for example, if I thought, let's see, Anthony Alfredo, $7,000 or $6,900, I'm going to put 10% on him to begin with, because he's a third of the odds to win the race in comparison to Austin Hill. Now I'm going to look at his place differential. Oh, he's starting far towards the back, so I need to prioritize him. He's in the 30s or whatever it might be. 10 times 3, we got him at 35%. He was roughly I think 30 at that point. So it was a general formula that I took. Doesn't require a whole lot of brains or effort to figure it out. But what I will say is I think that is the process I've been taking to try to project ownership in the past. And it's worked. So feel free to try it if you want. I'm going to do it again this week and we'll see what the results are. I think it's a very simple way where you don't have to buy people's ownership projections even. You can start figuring out how to do it yourself. And maybe I shouldn't be saying that, but what I will say is the more that we can teach you how to come up with these numbers yourself, I think the better we all are going to be as players. So
I want to try it, Mark. I could have told you the chalky guys would have been that percentage. That much I was confident on. I had a rough idea who some of the chalky guys were. Outside of that, though, I'm way off. I went through my lineups and saw the 60, 70% ownership and said that makes sense. And then I saw the guys at 20 to 30% ownership and went, wait, this guy was lower than I thought. This guy was higher than I thought. I was right on the low ownership, which was a dead giveaway. So at some point off the air, I'm going to talk more on that with you, Mark, because I'm having a hard time. I don't do great audioly. I probably need to see you write it out, or I need to write it out with you. So, but I don't want to take any more time on that. But Mark, that is really impressive to be that close in ownership. If you're within 5% consistently like that, that is going to be really, really helpful for all of us that are playing DFS.
So what I'll try to do this weekend is maybe I'll just throw on the Discord. I'll write out that process for each guy that I project, just so there's full transparency on how I got there, and then we'll see how we do and go from there.
Go from there.
The one thing I will address about this too, Mark, is I know we got ourselves another super speedway race coming up, but where I'm curious to see you try this is when we get to some of the other track types in the schedule coming up here.
Agreed.
I know we have a road course with Coda coming up right after Atlanta, and then we're going to finally get to some other track types and see some variety. I think there is where it's going to be really curious.
Hold on. We're not getting to a real track. And I get people are going to get mad at me because road courses are real tracks. But for NASCAR, it's a small part of what we do. We're not getting to a real track till race 4 of the season. Is that what you're telling me, Sean?
Yeah. They moved Coda up to race number 3 on the schedule this year.
Which it's in Texas. It's in the South. I get all that. We don't have quite the same West Coast swing, logistics, whatever. But we used to joke that you leave Daytona, we went to Atlanta, and the real NASCAR season started. Atlanta was always the second race, and then that changed. And then it was, we got to Vegas. I'm sorry. Rez.
I think at the different tracks, it's like inputting code. You just have to apply a little bit of a different approach to that formula. So I don't think it's going to be a one formula fits all type race types, because place differential will be different from one race to the other, and whether or not it should be prioritized.
Oh, sure. So it won't be a priority when we go to Martinsville, right?
Yeah,
it's going to be the exact opposite at Martinsville, because we're going to be chasing dominator points, laps led, fastest laps, that sort of stuff. So it's almost going to be like the inverse of the process you're doing now, potentially.
Yeah, maybe a different multiplier. So just a little same approach, different formula.
Right. I'm just impressed you did it, Mark. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for tracking it. Thank you for sharing your process. Like, I don't think you realize how huge this is, because I know you're used to other sports where it's pretty common. People talk about it. We don't talk about ownership in NASCAR enough, at least in my opinion. And I'm not talking about just our show. I've listened to other shows. There isn't a ton of ownership talk when it comes to NASCAR. And
yeah, and I mean, I know we got to move on, but one thing I'll say is I hear a lot of subs in the Discord always asking about ownership, not just NASCAR, but a lot of different sports. So if we can dissect how everyone breaks down ownership and allow subscribers to try to figure out ownership themselves, I'm not trying to put work in anyone's hands by any means. That's why we offer some of the products that we do, but I think it helps everyone's process knowing how we get there.
I would say knowing I want to pay to get the answers, but I like knowing where the answers come from, right?
Knowing
I appreciate you've done all the work, but I want to understand the work that went into it. Why? It's just like, Sean, we've talked about it. Some of the guys like the background I give on the picks, right? Instead of just throwing the names out there, they want to understand the logic behind it. So anyway, digress, move on, Sean. Don't.
All right, so we actually have some quick news stories that we want to just go through before we get into previewing Atlanta here. Now, Rich put this one here on the rundown here, which I think is pretty interesting as it is, and there's been a lot of chatter about this. But we could be seeing a fourth manufacturer in the Truck Series again next year. Dodge could be coming back.
It's not maybe. They have already applied for the approvals. It is happening. The Ram 1500 will be back in the Truck Series next year. The scuttlebutt, the part that we don't know, Sean, will we see Dodge in 2028 on the Cup level?
That's something to see, but I don't think it's fully far-fetched in order to think about that, though. Especially because when we talked about getting a fourth manufacturer in the Cup Series, I know Dodge has been one of the names that have been most commonly floating around. I think that them and Honda have been the two names I've heard the most.
So Honda hit a snag with the merger with Nissan that won't go through because they can't agree on evaluations. Like, that whole thing actually put a kibosh on a lot of Honda and NASCAR. The thing with Dodge that's interesting, and I want to dig more into this, the reason Dodge hasn't come back yet or sooner, they were looking for a team to have an engine shop. That's what they wanted. Penske used to be that for them. Penske stopped that. So when Dodge left, they said, look, we're willing to come back, but we need it to be with an engine shop. Joe Gibbs used to do it for Toyota. Their engine shop caught on fire, so TRD took that over for them. The Chevys come out of have Earnhardt Ganassi motors. So we know that. Ford has, is it Penske Yates, Sean?
Ford has Yates, and then Chevy actually is two. They have Hendrick, and then they have ECR.
ECR, that's right. So I thought for some reason Hendrick and ECR got somehow together there. I don't know where I got all that confused. But anyway.
I think they do share some things in common, like they share some
Okay.
similar information, but the engines themselves, I think, are a little bit different. But I think
Come from
anything that's like all Chevy info, they all share together.
So I'm curious to see, is Trackhouse, for example, because they're, one of the Chevy teams, is Trackhouse going to say, hey, we'll build an engine shop and go Dodge? Because, a lot of teams are going to want the new manufacturer because that puts them in tier 1 status, right? Do we see someone come from Ford? I got to believe it's going to come from Chevy first because Chevy's the deepest. Does RCR think about making a change? I mean, RCR's been with Chevy forever. I don't know. I don't want to put any scuttlebutt out there, but, RCR talk about them being the blue collar guy and all of that. Like, it would be kind of cool to see RCR maybe go Dodge and be a nameplate for the Dodge brand.
I think that's very interesting. But in my opinion, I think the two teams that are most likely to jump ship would be Trackhouse or Spire, if I had to guess.
Agree. I would agree with that. Mark's like, this is all gibberish to me. What are you talking about?
It makes me want to buy a Dodge truck, though, before the 2026 season. So I'll be looking out for some holiday deals at the end of this year.
I love my Ram, man. The Laramie I got, it's got the big skylight. It only opens so far, but I leave it open all the time. So like there is sun beating down in my truck all the time. I love it.
I'm trying to figure out. I don't know if I want a Silverado, a GMC, Sierra Denali. I mean, looking at a couple different options here, but got to win some more NASCAR money before we make the down payment.
And be like Shark Bait and go pay cash for your next new vehicle.
Well, no, we're gonna finance. Cash is king, so we need to hold on to some. No,
see, now he's getting all philosophical and smart with the money. We got to get the max rebate, so we'll finance it with them. We'll just pay it off early. It was just because Shark Bait actually did go buy. He came into the Discord way back when and was like, "Hey, I just paid cash for my new blah blah blah," and it was from winning from DFS. So,
but don't get a loan right to the dealership. You got to get a loan through a credit union, so you get a better interest rate. So I got it. It's got to be well thought out here before, regardless of the funds.
Oh, man, I'm gonna go car. Mark and I should go car shopping. He sounds like he's a good car shopper. Everybody I talk to hates car shopping. I love it.
Oh, we're going to get a full breakdown of the fees and talk about all the BS warranties that can come off that car. So this isn't a one-day impulsive buy here.
We got ourselves a savvy shopper on our hands. And also, I noticed he mentioned about the Fords. He mentioned about the Chevys. I guess he ain't interested in the Toyota trucks then, huh, Mark?
No,
They're smaller, John. They're smaller.
Yeah. I'm a Chevy Ram type of guy. Maybe GMC too. That's kind of where I'm looking. I think I'm
with you.
I think I'm leaning GMC, but we'll see.
All right. So that takes care of the poll there. We know Dodge could be coming back, but speaking of things that, well, in this case, aren't easy to come back from, we got ourselves penalties, guys. We got ourselves a big.
We've had controversy with the exhibition race and flags. We had controversy with the duels and flags. We had controversy with the 500 and flags. And now we got our first 100-point penalty, week 1. Giddy up.
Yep. It's NASCAR season back in full swing. It isn't NASCAR season unless a big penalty happens early in the season.
I want the screenshot of Mark's face that he just had there a minute ago. Like, it was just this look of, we're just here to watch sports. What a stupid thing. Like, I feel like I could just see him being like, this is just so weird and dumb. And I tend to agree. If that's not your stance, Mark, I don't want to speak for you.
It's one of the most frustrating things. I mean, and maybe from a smaller level, but even a guy speeding down pit road, like just stuff like that, where all of a sudden your lineup is you're in first place and now you're not even cashing because the jackass went too fast down pit road. Like,
and the kicker on that is everyone's like, well, he was only 0.2 over. No. Pit road speed's 50. They give you up to 55. They give you a 5-mile-an-hour buffer. So these clowns are taking the buffer and then some. That's what's funny about all that.
Was that the Xfinity race? Was it where in the what race was that? Where he just went flying and hit and took out oh my God, who was that?
That was the truck race, wasn't it? Where what's her name came flying down pit road, or was it Xfinity?
No,
No, it was Xfinity. It was definitely Xfinity. I
I
was trying to remember who it was.
and took out someone else's race, like completely wrecked the other guy. But like, and then they said that the spotter, there was the spotter gave them wrong information. The driver put it on the spotter and said it was his fault, basically.
Yeah. And then,
Well,
even then, there was the driver was conflicting their own information because they claimed at one point on the radio that they had no brakes too.
And then he was like, "No, I had brakes. It was just the spotter's fault."
Yeah.
And the thing is, Mark, we'll see this too, where someone's leaving pit road and someone's going down pit road. They're doing everything legally, and wham! And you're like, well, there went the third place car that I was looking money on that I only had 6% ownership, and they just got taken out by some moron. Yeah. I tell this is why I know people get upset and think I'm crazy, but this is why I say do not watch your lineups during NASCAR races. One lap, you could go from literally $3,000 to $0. And it could be nothing that happened. And 20 laps later, you're back to making $500. So I personally can't handle the heartache knowing that with 15 to go, I had first place wrapped up. With 30 to go, I was at least in first place. Like I had seen that happen so much that I just quit. It hurts so much because we have exactly what you talked about. And at least, like we talked about before show, at least the penalty, the 100 points, didn't change if you had Chase Briscoe. Granted, his ownership was so low.
All right, let's give quick context for the actual penalty in of itself here. The number 19 JGR Cup team, Chase Briscoe's team, was docked 100 driver and owner points as well as fined $100,000 and 10 playoff points, while crew chief James Small will be suspended for 4 races. JGR is going to appeal this penalty. The penalty came about as the number 19 team modified a single source part, the rear spoiler there, which in NASCAR's rulebook is a big no-no. You cannot do that.
Bonzi, who works on these teams and does his own racing and crews, he had a great little thread on it. From what he saw, he goes, this is actually hard to see if this was modified or if this is wear and tear. Now, obviously, Gibbs with the appeal will try to illustrate that it was wear and tear or something like that. My question to Bonzi that I never got a response from, if it was wear and tear, shouldn't we have seen it with at least 1 or 2 other cars? Now, they don't randomly test all of those. Chase Briscoe just happened to be the random draw, right? But what did Hamlin's car look like? What did Ty Gibbs' car look like? You know what I mean? What did Jimmy Johnson's? Jimmy Johnson's clearly passed tech just fine. So something to watch. Again, we're getting in the weeds on some of it, but this is big.
Yeah, I was going to say that the 2 cars that they took back to R&D happened to be the 2 drivers on the front row to start the race, Briscoe and Cindric. And then they took down Cindric's car, and they said that had no problems with it there, too.
So tell me, how random is it really when both the front row qualified cars get pulled to the R&D center?
I feel like occasionally they do make specific cars get picked. Like I think in this case it was a specific pick, but usually during most other regular races it is random.
I don't think it's ever very random personally. If you ever notice when there's a car that all of a sudden seems faster for 3 weeks in a row, that car, to your point, it's not all the time. That car gets pulled for random. So I don't know how random it is. I think there is a little rhyme and reason to the ones they pull, whether it's been so long since they've been to R&D or whatever. But, and in all fairness, NASCAR, I don't care that if it's not random. I mean, if you're doing your job, I would argue, yeah, maybe you just pull one at random. But if you've got questions, let's take a look at that car. Because that's the only way we're going to catch the cheating.
And go figure, it was another Gibbs team that ended up getting slapped with a massive penalty after how many they got last year, too.
Which I was sitting here and I said out loud to the dog, I was like, so when are people going to start calling Gibbs the cheaters instead of Hendrick? Because that's always been the thing. I'm like, but if you look at recent data, it's Joe Gibbs' team that's been doing the pushing the envelope.
Pretty much.
Damn Toyotas.
Mark, you would fit in so well with so much of the NASCAR crowd, bro. I'm just saying.
Just by saying that alone, we'll have
right.
NASCAR fans validate you.
I'm here in Tampa, man. I think it might have consumed me before I even realized it.
So where are we headed
gotta
next?
Say is them damn cheating Toyotas, and then you're right in.
Oh my God, we'll have to get your own fan account, Mark.
I'm ready. You won't see me driving a Toyota. That's for darn sure.
You made it clear with that truck conversation earlier.
I do love my Ram. I used to be a Chevy Silverado guy. I really do love my Ram. But I will say this, going forward, I will buy vehicles based on the dealership and the dealership service. Because all the vehicles get recalled now left and right. And yeah, there's a recall, but we don't know what it is to fix. So I'm at the point, if I can't trust the dealership service, they're not getting my buy.
Well, I just want to just want to close this out by saying JGR is going to appeal a penalty, but there's also one other pair of penalties that we've got from the Cup side of things too. Both the number 34, that's Todd Gilliland, and the number 51, that's Cody Ware's teams, were also fined 10 driver and owner points for a safety violation with ballast down outside of their containers.
Time out. Isn't it likely what got Bowman booted from the playoffs last year was because of weight? That's ballast. So now we have two cars where the ballast isn't in their containment areas. Like, I'm starting to feel like we're on the verge of a little bit of a pattern here, Sean.
It is interesting when you think about that too, because it was for that kind of reasoning why Bowman got the DQ in the playoffs late last year.
Well, let's preview Atlanta.
Yeah, sure. Let's get right on into it here, and let's talk about Atlanta before we get off on another ranting tangent here.
See, you guys got to button me up, man. We need to have, like, I don't know, some sort of device.
Yeah, you know what? That may not be a bad idea. Getting into Atlanta, what should we expect? Well, a lot of the similar stuff that we saw this past week at Daytona should also apply here in Atlanta. My main difference as far as how the racing should go is that Atlanta is going to be a little bit more track position dependent compared to Daytona, just because Atlanta is a harder track in order to make passes on, even if it is pack racing where drivers can go forth and make moves and find their way on the outside or the inside and move on up. There's not as much room on this track period in order to make those said moves. So track position, pit strategy, it is going to come into play once again. We're going to need to focus on place differential heavily, of course, too. Maybe not as hard as Daytona, but we're still going to need to focus a lot on that. Wouldn't you guys agree with that for the overall DFS strategy there?
Yeah, I would say so. I also think I think we're looking at 260 laps for this race now versus 200 from last week. So I think this is where laps led and fastest laps come into play a little bit more. So this one's going to be a little bit trickier. I think you're going to see the masses take the exact same approach as Daytona last week. And I think you have to scale it a little bit and maybe not 100% dedicate your strategy towards place differential.
So one thing I want to do is I want to go back and look at some Daytona races from the early 2000s. And the reason for that, Atlanta reminds me more of the pack racing we got at Daytona back then, where you would see anywhere from 3 to 6 cars in a single line, kind of leading a 2-wide pack. We won't see them get 3 wide at Atlanta, not on any sort of regular basis, maybe forcing an issue in a corner, but we aren't going to see more than that. So we're going to see the pack drawn out a little bit further. I think you're going to see, to Mark's point, somebody like Joey Logano leading more laps. Like we talked about last week, you go back to Daytona, recent history, 20 laps, 30 laps, 40 laps, 60 laps. That's about the max. Trucks, nobody was over. I think I wrote it up. Only 2 drivers hit over 24, and there was only 2 drivers that were over 10. So, I mean, again, that's only 100 laps compared to the Cup 200, but same concept. So at Atlanta, I think to your point, Mark, it's not going to be uncommon to see a Joey Logano up there leading the vast majority of a stage, for example, right? Especially the way they do the pit stops and coming in together. It won't be shocked if Joey Logano's pushing Cindric. They come in pit, they go back out, and it's the same group after everybody does pit stops, and we're right back to where we were. But I do think you're going to see it drawn out a little bit, and I won't be. That's why I said I kind of want to go back and see percentage of laps led at some of those early Daytona races. How often did we see lead changes? Because I think that is really more indicative of what we'll see from Atlanta, plus recent Atlanta history. I don't want everybody to remember last year's finish and assume that we get 3-wide racing all the way around that track, because we don't. That finish was an anomaly that, hopefully we get to see again. But, I mean, it was such a special thing. They had an hour-long special about it before the race started. I don't know if anybody saw that. It was kind of fun. But,
so damn close.
Well, it was cool hearing the driver's perspective, right? Like Swerve's like, I didn't know where I was at. I knew I saw him, and Blaney and I could only see him. And Kyle's like, well, I thought this. And I mean, it was really cool to hear those guys break it down and then hear the crew chiefs talk about it. And well, that's kind of on your driver. You just kind of hope he does it. You want to put him in the best position. So, honestly, I don't like Atlanta being this style racing, gentlemen. But for me, at least it reminds me a little bit of old Daytona, so I don't quite hate it as much.
Yeah, I still prefer having old Atlanta back myself. That was just a better track with better racing. But at the very least, what we did get, though, is still not totally bad in of its own right, too, I'd say. It's enjoyable enough that you're like, all right, I can get behind this, too.
Right. And we don't really have the big one there, not like we do at Daytona. So that makes me feel a little bit better. I will say that, Mark, we may see quite a few cars wrecked, but it's going to be because of multiple incidents instead of one incident that takes out 3/4 of the field,
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm looking at even some of the starting and finishing positions, and I mean, it's dead. It's right down the middle. It's a balance. Like you got 5 from last year, 5 guys that started in the top 10 that finished, and then 5 guys that, were in the mid-20s that finished in the top 10. So it is, I think you have to find a little bit more balance this week in your lineups.
Totally
and I think you're right, Mark. I think we need to, can we all agree that one easy way to cash, and it's not going to be to win at all, is be chalky with 3 or 4 of your drivers and go contrarian on 1 or 2 or more, something like that. I mean, I have cash lineups with 5 chalky drivers and that 1 contrarian. Why? Well, when you have 60%, 70% ownership and that guy wrecks, it doesn't matter. 60, 70% of the lineups are dead with him anyway. So where the difference was, did you have Bubba Wallace that nobody was on because he started too far forward? Or did you go ahead and go with Brad Keselowski or Jimmy Johnson, who started in the back, that another 40%? Like, I was shocked Jimmy Johnson's numbers were there. It was a little low, right, considering where he started.
Oh, yeah.
But not that many people had a lot of faith, right? So I had quite a few lineups with Jimmy Johnson. I couldn't get away from him starting 40th. How do you not start the guy that's starting dead last? Like, everybody's going to wreck. This guy could wreck and be 20th and gain 20 bonus points. So,
and let alone he ended up being third and ended up being the highest scoring driver on both sites this past week.
Right. But not all my JJ lineups cashed. The ones that cashed were the ones where the contrarian guys, my low ownership guys, still were reasonable. They didn't have to be top dogs, but they weren't -7 points. They were at least 29 points or 35 points or something like that, right? So I think, to your point, Mark, I think it's going to pay this week. And it's going to be tough. We'll talk about as we talk about the drivers here, because history, I think, is going to be as indicative, and even this past week's race as indicative of anything we see from qualifying, because it's going to be in the draft again. Handling, I will say this, if you hear drivers during interviews talk about their car's not handling well or it's slipping and sliding, be careful. Any of the drivers, even if they seem slow in qualifying, say their car's handling well, those are the guys we're going to want to watch. Those are the guys that are going to start 20th and 25th that are going to be capable of being in the top 10.
So you don't think that's like driver speak, like just from a PR standpoint? Yeah,
No.
We didn't do that well, we didn't qualify that great, but I thought the car handled well. And you think that's just genuine?
My experience with drivers, and crew chiefs will be a little more coy, but it's almost easy to spot. Outside of a driver like Bubba Pollard that likes to just talk smack, when Bubba Pollard goes, we suck, we just suck today, watch out, that's a bad fast car. Okay, that is a thing with him. drivers tend to be brutally honest when they're at the track and outside the race car. Like they like to talk about what they're feeling, what it's going, because here's the deal. Nothing's really hidden. They say it on the radio. So if you're at the track and got a scanner, you're hearing the same things. And having a scanner and all that goes back to the 80s, right? Like that's always been a thing, being able to hear. The other thing you'll hear drivers be honest about when you hear them talking about another car. I think look, we're missing a little speed in practice, but I still think we got a top 10 car. I really like the way it handles. I don't know if we got anything for the 11 or the 22, but I think we can be competitive. That tells me they've got a likely top 5 car, and the 11 and the 22 are the cars potentially to beat. So I maintain this, Mark. Watching qualifying and practice and the driver interviews will give you more insight than you can feasibly imagine. It is honestly shocking.
It's like if you were to compare it to the NFL, it's like, keeping up with the injury reports. What do the tea leaves look like? Did the guy practice on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday? What did that trend look like? It's the same type of thing. You have to follow it closely. I do have one other question. I know we're way over, but you said drafting tracks. Should we put more weight on qualifying and on a drafting type of track, or just the same as less? Okay,
less.
Agreed.
The reason for that, when we get into these drafting tracks with the pack, these cars are limited on the output of horsepower. So what really drives the speed, and you'll see this, we didn't see it at Daytona much because they ran 50% throttle, okay? But if they were running 100% throttle in qualifying, say they ran, Sean, what are we running at qualifying Daytona now, speed-wise? 180? Somewhere in that ballpark?
Roughly, give or take.
Okay. So in the draft, if they're 100% throttle, we're probably looking at 190, 192, 193. Okay. So everybody's going to be faster. When you go to, I almost said Atlanta, Sean, because I miss old Atlanta so much. When we go to Vegas, they will gain speed in the draft to catch up to the car. But part of the problem with NASCAR in general these days is the aero and the inability to pass. So when they get outside beside someone, it's not the same, okay? So qualifying gives us a much better idea of what these cars have natural speed, I'll call it, okay? At the drafting tracks, we don't really care about natural speed. You see this a lot at Daytona, less at Talladega because it's faster, but we'll see it at Atlanta. Daytona, the old adage for crew chiefs was, Talladega, we want speed. Daytona, we want handling, okay? Because it's a little bumpier, it's a little more narrow. They want to be able to drive the car in the draft. At Talladega, it's so big, so wide, especially after a repave, they just want the speed. I want it trimmed out as fast as possible. I don't care if I can barely hold on to it. I need it to go that direction as fast as possible. So when we go to Vegas and these other places, where they qualify is going to, not only from like a place differential standpoint, but it is much bigger. And Sean and I talked about this early last year. I was shocked that qualifying was a better indicator of speed than practice was. I started 20 years ago, 10 consecutive lap average was the gold standard. I use that for everything to build around. Now I will look at that and it comes into play, but where they qualify is having me move drivers up or down a lot more lately. Short tracks too. Short tracks, 1.5 miles, all of that.
I think it's also important in order to emphasize too about when drivers are in practice about the changes in their speed, about how much it falls off or doesn't fall off, I think is a major factor in analyzing the true raw speed that these teams can really carry. And I think that matters most at the intermediates and at the shorter tracks, particularly.
100% agree. And the sad thing is, Sean, we now practice a little longer. Hopefully we get a better taste of that. That was something we really struggled last year. We only had a handful of 10 consecutive lap averages and was almost always only at the short tracks. Well, Sean, you know what? Martinsville, 10 laps is nothing in a run. 10 laps is we do 80 laps in a fuel run, right? Or 100 laps in a fuel run. So the fall off we're worried about is not even taking place till 30 laps in. Yeah. Right? And to your point, Sean, that fall off is what matters. Whoever falls off the least, typically, Mark, that's when you hear them talk about a short run car versus a long run car. And they'll do things to change that, like add tire pressure. Let's say there's a late caution, so they know they want to have a more short run car. But that's a lot of what you hear is you'll hear drivers talk about that too. I think we got a good long run car. All right. That means at the end of a pit cycle, expect these guys to be near the front. But if we end up with a late caution, it's problematic for them, right? So I'm not as worried about qualifying speed this weekend. I'm more interested in drivers that tell me how they feel. And honestly, the cars that I felt looked fastest or seemed fastest this past weekend are drivers I'm focusing on for this weekend.
All right. Well, on that note, let's get into the part-timer and notable list for all three series this week. How about you start us off here on the trucks as per usual here, Rich? Who do we got today?
We got William Stallwich back in the number 1, Nathan Bird in the 02, Josh Rome in number 2. Did I say that right this time?
Yeah, you got it. Good stuff.
All right. Michael McDowell's back in the 07. He had kind of a bummer last weekend. Now this is first of Kyle Busch's 5 races for Spire in the truck series. Just a heads up on that. Keith McGee in the 22. Bailey Curry's back again in the 44. Oh, I always get this guy's name wrong. Kanori Agata in the number 63. Luke Finhouse in the 66. And Justin Carroll in the 90.
And then meanwhile, in the Xfinity Series, we got Nick Lights in the 07 for SS Greenlight Racing. Eric Almirola is back in the number 19 for Joe Gibbs Racing. This is the first of his now 9 scheduled races for the year. Joey Gase is in the number 35 driving for his own team. Mason Massey is in the number 45 for Alpha Prime Racing. Mason Maggio is in the second Joey Gase car, the number 53. Leland Honeyman Jr. is in the number 70 for Derek Cope. Carson Ware is back again in the number 74. Then we have Josh Bilicki and CJ McLaughlin in 2 of the 3 DGM Racing entries. While in the Cup Series, we only have 3 part-time entries that are all going to make the show this week. Corey LaJoy in the number 01, which is another Rick Ware racing car, but is also labeled Stacking Penalties Performance. JJ Yaley's in the number 44 for NY Racing, and BJ McLeod is back in the number 78 for his own team, Live Fast.
Hat tip to BJ McLeod. He was one of the 4 cars that did not get damaged this past week.
Shout out to BJ there.
I like
Now, before we get into our drivers, this is just a quick reminder that if you enjoy the content, if you enjoy the picks, if you enjoy the analysis, you want more of it, you go over to fantasyguru.com. You can get the MVP package. It's still on the flash sale. It could be ending any day now. Get that for $79.99 to get all sports, but football and baseball, it'll cover you for a year, so that's a great, fantastic deal. And for those looking for MLB help, the MLB Draft Guide is available on Fantasy Guru. You can get Ray Flowers' latest analysis, info, and so much more over at fantasyguru.com. Now, let's get right on into it, fellas, here. Let's get into our top price picks to watch here. So let's quickly go into it here. Now, for me, I have 3 drivers here. I have 2 from the same team, 1 from a different team. I have Ryan Blaney and Austin Cindric from Team Penske, and then I have Chase Elliott there. I like all 3 of these drivers a lot. Blaney has been the most consistent driver as far as finishes at Atlanta has gone. Cindric, he's led a lot of laps at this particular track as well. And he's certainly going to have a chip on his shoulder after losing the Daytona 500 this past week. And as for Chase Elliott, he already showed at Daytona that his team knows how to tailor cars very well with this style of racing. So I expect him to be very competitive as well.
So this one's a little bit of a gut shot for you. William Byron. He has a knack for starting hot. I know he didn't win Atlanta last year, but it wasn't that long ago when he did. I'm just going with the momentum he's got. And to be fair to everybody, until we see qualifying in practice, this was the hardest group for me to narrow down. I've relisted my list 4 different times. So take that with a grain of salt with some of these names. I've kind of got to get out of my own head to kind of narrow this down. But I got William Byron, Kyle Busch, because I thought the RCR cars were fast last week. Joey Logano, because I thought he had the fastest car out there. And Brad Keselowski, I thought he showed what he typically does at the restrictor plate type tracks. So those are my 4 for this week.
All right. Yeah. Give us your 3, Mark.
I went ahead. I've got very similar ones. Blaney, 9,800, Logano at 9,700, and Cindric at 9,000. So a little bit of a blend here. I think Cindric and Logano are going to come in with a chip on their shoulder. I think they both look good last week. Last week's a pretty strong indicator going into this week, like you were just saying, Rich. And the odds and the pricing line up here. I think at the end of the day, like we're saying, that we do have to look at where their place differential is. That's going to dictate what ownership looks like and dictate whether or not I truly land on these guys. But I think Logano sticks out too. I mean, he's got some wins. Like this is a guy that's pissed off. He's got a lot of pull in the sport. It just feels like a comeback type of week for Logano.
2 years ago, Joey Logano, he ended up losing the Daytona 500 by finishing second. And what did he go on to do? He won the first race at Atlanta that year. I think there's a possibility that we could see that again this week. Now, also, two other observations that I do want to share here. First of all, for Mark, he's firmly planted his flag with all three of the Team Penske drivers, so that should tell you something right there. And second of all, did you know, guys, that since Atlanta has gone through the repave with the current style of racing we have now, there have only been 5 drivers in order to lead 100 laps or more total between all the last 6 races?
Let me guess who they are. Blaney's one.
Yes, he is.
Is Bubba Wallace one?
He is not one of them.
Okay. I'm going to go with Joey and Brad are probably 2 of them. No, can't be Brad. Brad struggled there 3 years ago.
Joey is another one of them. That's 2 so far. Brad did not make it there.
No.
Cindric
is 3.
Chase Elliott?
That's 4.
I feel like the last
Is it my buddy Kyle Busch?
It is not Kyle Busch.
Damn. I was like, tell me it's Kyle Busch. William Byron?
It's Byron. Yeah, Byron was the last one. So you notice I specifically named those 5 drivers because it's all Penske and Hendrick. That I just want to illustrate that fact that at this particular track since the repave, Penske and Hendrick have been dominant here.
Hey, might as well just stack them. Create a lineup where you just stack those 2 teams.
Yeah. The only
probably can't because of pricing.
You might be able to do like a 2 and 2 and then just take 2 value plays and run it like that.
Yep. I think that's not a bad approach, quite frankly, Mark.
And not to mention that between the last 6 races as well, those 2 teams ended up winning 5 out of the 6, with the only outlier being last year's exact race with Daniel Suarez winning. So keep those.
And it almost was Blaney. And it almost was Blaney, too, for that matter.
Exactly. Keep those teams and drivers in mind as we go on through. But let's get into our mid-tier drivers to watch now. Speaking of Daniel Suarez, he's on my list right there, of course, because his record at this track since the Atlanta repave has been absolutely incredible. He's one of only 2 drivers in order to get 5 top 10 finishes in the past 6 races at Atlanta. And the other one is Ryan Blaney, who has the best average finish right there. As for my other drivers on the list, I have his teammate Ross Chastain, because I think Ross is really underrated at this particular track. He's finished top 15 in just about every race at this site since 2022. So he's been highly consistent. And I think that price on DraftKings in particular for him is very, very off and weird. As for my other 2 drivers, well, I got 2 drivers here because I like both of these guys. And I think depending on place differential, I might lean one or the other. But I have Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and I have Ty Gibbs. Now, Ty Gibbs, he led 37 laps in his last appearance at Atlanta. And those Gibbs cars sometimes showcase some decent speed at this style of racing. And then Ricky, you got to remember, Ricky's also good at this track. He scored positive place differential on several occasions in Atlanta, and he knows how to do well at this style of racing.
I'm in total agreement with you there. I have Bubba Wallace. It's the same thing. He does well at this style of racing. He hasn't had all the best finishes, but if you go back and look, he has run well in just about all the Atlanta races. Not as well as he has at Daytona and Talladega, though. So I want to keep that in mind. And I'd like to remind everybody, last year was when Sean and I pushed Daniel Suarez at 45-1 to win. That was we talked extensively about him on this podcast this time last year, because we both were impressed with his average finish, how he typically ran there, and could not believe the odds were so out of line. So just like to mention that when you see something completely out of line on the odds there, Mark, feel free to call it out, because I tell you what, you usually are onto something. I'm also on Ricky Stenhouse, and I kind of like Ryan Preece. It's more of a gut shot. He ran really well at the duels, ran well at the 500. He is the guy that went airborne and did the wheelie. Some of that concerns me, because you could tell he was very upset about being airborne for a second time at that type of racing. But it's just something I know. I like Brad. I like Priest. The RFK cars have done very well at the super speedway style races.
That could be one to watch right there as well. Ryan Preece, he doesn't have the best track record of finishes. You did mention that. But I think just the difference is that he's in an RFK car, and those cars usually carry quite a bit of speed at this style of racing right there too. And just for reference on your earlier point about a line being very off too, especially in the betting market there, I personally find Ross Chastain's line is a little bit off. In my opinion here too, because he's currently 22-1 to win on DraftKings. I think that should be a little bit higher. Don't you think?
Yeah, I also, well, here's my thing. I've actually got an additional bet outside of everything else. I'll just throw it in there now. I got Ross Chastain on Hard Rock at plus 130 to make the top 10. So we're talking about a guy that, who other drivers who have similar stats, every single one of those other guys are Logano, Byron, guys who are like minus 230 to make the top 10. And for some reason, you can get him on Hard Rock at plus 130, DraftKings at plus 110. So that's a bet I'm locking in tonight. He's also a value driver on DraftKings itself at $7,600. So he's one of my mid-tier guys. I got Suarez along with you as well, and I'm also going Mikey McDowell. But my biggest thing with Chastain is, we've got a guy that $7,600. It's the best value across the board when you're looking at the pricing for all of these drivers. 5 top 20s, but 3 top 10s in the past 6 races in the next gen car here. So to me, it's a no brainer. You're paying. Chastain basically has the exact same type of success as Austin Cindric, and Cindric is priced up at $9,000. So you're getting $1,400 off on a guy like Chastain here. I love the top 10 bet. I don't know about winning the race or even top 5, but just cracking the top 10 at plus 130, in my opinion, is a steal.
And let's not forget who his teammate is right there, Mark. The guy that won this race 1 year ago.
There you go. That might be a good stack, right? I mean, they're both guys who have great driver ratings on this track. I mean, and now you're getting a little bit of value. You throw it in with a couple Hendricks, a couple Hendricks guys, a couple Penske guys, and now you get yourself a lineup.
I like it. I like that approach quite a bit there. Any last comments before we move on, Rich? All right, then let's move on to our potential sleepers and value plays. Now, I got 4 drivers listed over here just because I couldn't make up my mind on 3, and I have to mention all 4. But I've got Eric Jones, Justin Haley, Corey LaJoie, and then Carson Hocevar. Now, Eric Jones, I absolutely love because he's one of the most consistent drivers on this track. He scored place differential every single time that he's ran into New Atlanta. Justin Haley, he's also got a good average finish for the price range as well. Corey LaJoie, this is one of his best tracks since the Atlanta repave. And then Carson Hocevar, there aren't many guys below the 6K range on DraftKings, and he's also really cheap on FanDuel. He's like around the 3K, 4K range over there. I mean, considering the results that he scored 2 top 20s in both races last year, definitely worth taking a shot on that. And he's also the teammate to Justin Haley now this year, who's in that number 7 car. And we know Haley, he's been good. Even if he hasn't ran an Aspire car yet at this track, I expect Haley to bring some results just because historically he's been good no matter what here.
Yeah.
I think Rich might be muted.
Yeah. And
yeah, I'm sorry, I'm laughing. I said, I'm right with you. I said, we got a lot of overlap on this group between all of us. I'm sorry. I'm on Eric Jones. Look, I'm going to sound like a broken record until I'm proven wrong in about 4 to 6 weeks, and I don't think I will be. RCR has found some speed, and they have always, this goes back to Dale Senior days and Mike Skinner. They have always done well at this style of racing. So I'm all about me some Kyle Busch. He almost won last year. Austin Dillon, who I thought ran well in the duels. So Eric Jones, Austin Dillon, and honestly, Noah Gragson. Nobody's been talking about it, but if you watched on Sunday, he was pretty slick, and he has a pretty. If you go back and look at his Xfinity record at the Super Speedway racing, Noah Gragson has been very good. He's been meh at the Cup level, but as Sean had pointed out, new team. This particular team he's with now, Front Row, has had a history of running well at these tracks. So I think Noah Gragson's kind of a sneaky gem in the mix. I can't wait to see what Mark has for ownership, because if Mark shows him having low ownership, I am probably going all in on Noah Gragson, and I can't quit Justin Haley either. I have high hopes for that 7 car.
I had a little bit of Noah Gragson last week, so that was a nice one. I think that's a great call there. So we'll definitely throw him in the player pool and see what he looks like. I had Eric Jones, Justin Haley, and Corey LaJoie. So I don't want to beat a dead horse too much here, but I think the nice thing about LaJoie is obviously the price point is a little bit lower, and that gives you the flexibility to spend up on some guys that, we talked about previously, especially in the upper tier. Outside of that, Haley, just from an eyeball test for me, I thought looked pretty good last week. I mean, we didn't get the results in the actual race that I thought we would get from him, but he's well worth it. And these are the obvious value plays. So I think once we see what the order looks like, we're going to get a few more value plays, maybe sub 6K. So just keep an eye out for that on the Discord moving forward.
To your point there, Mark, about the eye test with Justin Haley, he started 35th in the Daytona 500 and then took that number 7 car to a 19th place finish. So a pretty significant gain overall right there. And to our points about Noah Gragson and Corey LaJoie, you got to also remember that the teams that they're running for, Corey LaJoie, he's running in what's technically a Rick Ware car. They have that technical alliance with RFK Racing. So you could call that an RFK light kind of car. And as for Gragson with Front Row, well, Front Row has that technical alliance with Penske now. So they're kind of a Penske light team of sorts as well. So do keep that in mind when picking these drivers out too.
That's good stuff.
Now
I do like the Carson Hocevar pick there, Sean. I think he has a knack at these tracks too. I think people are sleeping overall on Hocevar as a general rule.
Oh, for sure, for sure. He finished in the top 20 of both Atlanta races last year, so really, that just goes to show that he can be a very sneaky pick, especially if he starts far back enough. Now, let's get into our DFS core fours right here. So I've got Ryan Blaney, who's 9,800 on DK and 14K on FanDuel. I have Ross Chastain, who is 7,600 on DraftKings and 8,200 on FanDuel. I have Eric Jones, who's 6,800 on both sites. And then for DraftKings only, I have a lean towards Austin Cindric at 9,000. But on FanDuel, I have a lean towards Chase Elliott at 11,500. Hit us with the rest of your core fours there, guys.
I can't quit Joey Logano. Daniel Suarez price still seems right. You guys are kind of talking me into Ross Chastain, though, so I'm going to have to kind of reevaluate there. I can't quit Kyle Busch. As long as Kyle Busch is in an RCR car at these type of tracks, it's going to be hard for me to quit him, so to speak, but I may not have the price point. I would rather have Joey than Kyle. So if I got to make a pick there based on cost, I would. Bubba Wallace, like I said, has not done as well at Atlanta as he does the other tracks. I feel like something's coming with him, man. And you saw a taste of it at the duels and the 500. I'm telling you, something's coming. And I got to give honorable mention to Eric Jones. He may end up having to be in the core just because of pricing. I kind of like how Sean's got his broke down, but Eric Jones, every time he starts to get there, something unfortunate happens to the team shuts down, whatever. I feel like he's on the cusp again, and this time the team's not going anywhere. I think he's the staple that Jimmy Johnson wants at Legacy right now. So I have high hopes for Eric Jones as well.
Yeah, I would agree with Rich. Sean, I think I actually like your core four the most here. I had Logano, Cindric, Suarez, and Haley. A lot of those guys are interchangeable. Suarez and Chastain, Haley and Eric Jones, Haley even and LaJoy. So for me, all of those are viable pivots. But I do think Cindric presents a cornerstone of a lineup just because of the fact that he can still provide those upper tier points. He is not necessarily as much of a household name as other drivers might be in that tier, but he certainly has the numbers to do what we would expect out of a 9K driver. So helps you save a little bit of money. Maybe it helps you pay up elsewhere, especially if you throw in one cheap option like LaJoy and gives you all the flexibility in the world to put out the rest of your lineup.
Like it.
I think that's a spot on take with the pivot options too. And I think you're spot on with Cindric. He's earned the spot at these types of tracks to be in that top tier, but he's one of the bottom guys in that top tier. And so the price is it's awfully sweet.
Yeah.
For sure. Now let's get into our betting core fours here. Who do we think is going to win here? Well, I have myself Ryan Blaney at plus 800. And then I have Joey Logano at plus 900, Austin Cindric at 11-1 plus 1100, and then Chase Elliott at 12-1 plus 1200. And I'm also throwing in a long shot here of Justin Haley at plus 5,000. Right. So he's 50-1 odds right there in order to win this race.
I apologize. I did not pull up the odds. That's it. I'm planting my flag, Sean. I went Justin Haley at 50-1. That screams Daniel Suarez at 45-1 last year. It really does, Sean.
I was torn between whether if I wanted to make my long shot him or Eric Jones. Eric Jones is at 45-1 as well, plus 4,500. So, yeah, you can also think about that too. And Jones, he's ran pretty good at this particular track before. I just only went with Haley just as the featured long shot because his odds are a little bit deeper.
I'm going to have to watch driver interviews during practice because I think that's a good call out on Eric Jones because you know me, I like to bet stories. Eric Jones getting the short end of the deal in the duels and then bounces back to take a win at Atlanta.
That would be a very interesting win.
Mm-hmm. And Jimmy Johnson legacy after having the top 3 finish. Like, I don't know, man. This Eric Jones story is starting to paint a picture here. You know what I'm saying? That's a good call out. I apologize, guys. I forgot to look at the odds. I'm still very twisted on this week, so I don't mean to be so wishy-washy, but I'm struggling. Like I said, I'm kind of doing a balance, and I'd like to see some practice in some of the driver interviews. But I can't quit Joey Logano, and I probably won't quit Joey Logano until either he cashes one of my bets or he goes winless for the year. So I guess that means I'll probably bet him most of the year. So I got Joey Logano. Like I said, on William Byron, it's just more kind of a gut thing. Kyle Busch and Bubba Wallace. I could easily, none of these odds jump out at me that I feel like we need to jump at them right now. So I'm okay kind of waiting and seeing a little bit with the group I've listed here.
Just to further elaborate on the odds, since you didn't list them, Logano's at plus 900. Kyle Busch is at 11-1, plus 1,100. You had, who else did you have here? Byron, he's at 13-1 plus 1,300, and then Bubba Wallace, he's
22?
the deepest at 2,000 plus 2,000.
Okay, I had him at 22-1 was my guess, so 20-1. Okay.
I did the same thing as Sean here, so I got the same exact guys. Now, I think the strategy that I would take with these though is so you got 10-1 basically on average with Blaney, Logano, Cindric, and Elliott. I almost like the idea of maybe placing the bet on Cindric and Elliott now, and then Logano and Blaney later, hoping that maybe they start further back. We get them at 1,200 versus 900 or plus 800. So hoping we get just a little bit of extra juice there. And then and then also making sure we get the Haley and the Eric Jones bets in before qualifying as well.
That's a good call out, because if you put one unit on all those guys, if any of them hit you, at worst you break even.
Yeah. Yeah, and then if you get one of those long shots, then you're way in the profit. So
yeah.
Truly.
Okay. All right. I dig it. I do like, one of my favorite things for Daytona Talladega is the betting, because you can bet a unit on 5, 6, 7, 8 drivers, not overspend, and still have really a fighting, sweating chance at the end of the race. You know what I mean?
Looking at the betting board as it is here, there's one other driver that I do want to point out that is also interesting in this respect that Rich Maletto in particular mentioned. Noah Gragson, he's at 70-1 odds to win.
Ooh, that's kind of a fun novelty bet, isn't it? Put a buck on it to win 70.
Yeah, let's throw a McChicken on it,
Right?
I like that. I like that too.
I do like that.
I can get down with that.
All right. Well, guys, unless we have anything else, I guess that'll do it for this week, right?
Yep. I think I talked off and ranted enough today when I didn't mean to. I do want to throw this out there. I will now be referring to NASCAR as RES, Racing Entertainment Series. I think it's very much in line with WWE, which I will say this. I am more interested in WWE today, with all the background stories and the behind the scenes looks and the explaining of, how they do it, what's work and all that. They aren't hiding what they are. And I'm actually more interested in it. And that's where my muse came for the RES. So I refer to it now as RES going forward.
All right. He's planting his flag with the RES on that one.
I am.
All right, fellas. That'll do it for this week. If you've enjoyed the Race Guru Thunder Hour, be sure to follow us. I'm at SeanE247. You could find Mark Hogan fishing out DFS wins at DFS Marlin. And then, Rich, he doesn't want people to follow him, so he's not going to put his handle right there.
If you really want to follow me on Twitter, feel free. But I'm telling you, all I'm going to do is piss you off at Fantasy Bosco. You're much better off just sticking to the content in the Discord and the stuff on the website. I'm more than happy to interact with anybody on Twitter, but be warned, it is not for everybody. My feed is not for everyone. Just a heads up.
See, he gave you a nice and pretty concise warning, so don't say we didn't warn you there. All right, everyone. To those that have been listening or watching, be sure to check out all the rest of our content over at fantasyguru.com. Rich is going to have you covered in Discord for trucks. Mark is going to have you covered in Xfinity. I'll cover the Cup Series this week. Those are our assignments. You're going to be here to absorb all the information and content. Go over to fantasyguru.com. Once again, get any of the packages there. And you know what? Hope you've all enjoyed the Race Guru Thunder Hour. Let us know how we did. And you know what? See you all next time. Peace.